The night before his potential death sentence, Nelson Mandela faced two impossible choices. In the prison visiting room, his wife Winnie clutched his hands, tears streaming down her face, begging him to compromise and live. His daughters needed a father. His elderly mother had traveled days to see him. But saving his life meant betraying millions who had no voice. This is the untold human story of the most painful decision any person could face, choosing between the people you love and the principles you live for. 3 days before sentencing, Winnie Mandela arrived at Pretoria Central Prison with their two young daughters, Zenani and Zindzi. The visiting room was cold, institutional, designed to strip away any comfort or intimacy. A glass partition separated them, forcing the family to speak through a monitored telephone. Nelson saw immediately that Winnie had been crying for hours, her eyes swollen and red. "Nelson, please," Winnie's voice cracked through the phone receiver. "The girls need their father. I need my husband. Your mother is ill. She may not survive losing you." She placed her hand against the glass, and Nelson mirrored the gesture from his side, as close to touching as the system allowed. Zenani, only 5 years old, pressed her small face against the glass. Not fully understanding why Daddy couldn't come home, Zindzi, at 4, simply cried, sensing the adult fear surrounding her. These were the faces of Nelson's personal world, the intimate cost of his political convictions. Winnie had endured months of police harassment, threatening phone calls in the middle of the night, and neighbors too afraid to speak with her. She had become a single mother while her husband sat in prison awaiting possible execution. Now she made one final, desperate appeal to the man she loved. Just tell them what they want to hear. Apologize, show remorse, live for us. Nelson's throat tightened. How could he explain to his 5-year-old daughter that Daddy might choose death over compromise? Nelson's mother, Nozakini Fanny, made the grueling journey from the Transkei rural homeland to Pretoria despite her failing health. At 76 years old, she had already buried 3 children. The prospect of losing her son to the hangman's noose was destroying her. Prison officials, in a rare moment of humanity, allowed her a brief visit without the glass partition. She held Nelson's face in her weathered hands, speaking in their native Xhosa. "My son, I have lived long enough to see terrible things, but I have not lived long enough to bury you for choosing politics over family." Her words cut deeper than any prosecutor's accusations. This wasn't political pressure. This was a mother's primal grief. Nelson's father had died when he was young, leaving his mother to raise the family alone in poverty. He owed her everything: his education, his opportunities, his very survival. Now she was asking for one thing: her son's life. Was that too much for a mother to request? She told him about the community back home, how they prayed for him every night, how they needed him alive to continue the struggle. "Dead heroes cannot lead," she whispered, "and your family cannot survive on your martyrdom." She squeezed his hands with surprising strength for her age. "Choose us, Nelson. Please choose us." When she left, Nelson sat alone in his cell, her perfume still lingering, feeling the weight of maternal love pressing down on his conscience. That night, Nelson couldn't sleep. He lay on his narrow prison cot, staring at the ceiling, trapped between two unbearable truths. If he compromised, showed remorse, distanced himself from armed resistance, he could likely receive a reduced sentence. He might see his daughters graduate, dance at their weddings, meet his grandchildren. He and Winnie could grow old together. His mother would die in peace, knowing her son survived. But the cost of that survival haunted him. Millions of black South Africans had no choice, no voice, no platform. They lived under systematic oppression with no opportunity to bargain for better conditions. If their most visible leader betrayed the cause to save himself, what message would that send? That fighting for freedom wasn't worth personal sacrifice. That the powerful could always break resistance by threatening what people loved most. Nelson understood the apartheid regime's strategy perfectly. They weren't just threatening his life, they were weaponizing his love for his family. They knew that a man willing to die for principles might still bend to save his children. It was psychological warfare of the cruelest kind. He thought about Winnie's face, about his mother's pleading, about his daughters who deserved a father. The guilt was suffocating. What kind of man chooses ideology over his family's well-being? Yet what kind of leader abandons millions to protect his own loved ones? There was no good answer, only impossible choices with devastating consequences either way. What few people knew was Winnie's own internal conflict. She loved Nelson with fierce devotion, but she also understood the political stakes better than almost anyone. As an activist herself, she believed in the struggle for freedom. She had endured police brutality, arrests, and constant surveillance because she shared Nelson's convictions about justice and equality. The night after visiting Nelson, she sat alone in their small Orlando West home in Soweto, surrounded by photographs of happier times. She wrote in her diary words she could never speak aloud. I want him to live, but I understand why he might choose to die. I am asking him to betray everything we believe in because I am selfish enough to want him alive. What kind of wife does that make me? Her friends tried to comfort her, but they didn't understand the complexity of her position. If Nelson compromised and survived, would she eventually resent him for abandoning the cause? If he maintained his principles and died, would she hate herself for not trying harder to save him? Either outcome promised emotional devastation. Winnie also carried another burden. She knew that if Nelson died, she would become the symbol, the face of his legacy, responsible for carrying forward everything he stood for. She would have to be strong for their daughters while privately drowning in grief. The apartheid system would intensify their persecution, using her widowhood as another tool of intimidation. She wanted her husband alive, but she also knew that some loves transcend personal desire. On the morning of his final statement, Nelson requested one last brief meeting with Winnie before court. Through the monitored phone, he said words that would haunt them both. Forgive me." Winnie immediately understood what he meant. He was choosing the movement over their marriage, the cause over their children, principles over survival. Her tears flowed freely, but she nodded. In that moment, she made her own impossible choice, supporting her husband's decision, even though it might make her a widow and their daughters fatherless. "I will raise them to understand," she whispered. "I will make sure they know their father chose to stand for something greater." When Mandela stood to deliver his prepared to die speech, he carried the weight of family sacrifice in every word. The phrase was unjust about personal courage. It was about choosing millions of voiceless people over the few he loved most. It was about believing that some principles matter more than individual happiness. After the sentencing to life imprisonment instead of death, Winnie collapsed in the courtroom. Not from relief, but from the realization of what lay ahead. Decades of prison visits through glass-raising daughters alone, enduring harassment without her husband's protection. Nelson had survived execution, but their family life had still been sentenced to death of another kind. Love, they both learned, sometimes means supporting impossible choices that tear your heart apart. Could you choose between your family's happiness and your deepest principles? Share your thoughts in the comments about this impossible dilemma and subscribe to explore more untold human stories behind history's greatest moments. Your perspective matters deeply. This is a story of triumph. Did the protagonist make the right decisions? If you were in this situation, what would you do? Share your opinion in the comments. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Memorable Stories and Overcoming, where inspiring stories of triumph and justice are shared daily.